I had been covering political hearings for nearly a decade, but the energy in the courtroom that morning was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Congressman Adam Schiff, known for his calculated demeanor, entered the chamber tight-lipped and hyper-focused. Something was off. He barely nodded to the usual press crew and shot a quick glance at Judge Jeanine Pirro, who sat at the bench like a statue carved from ice. It was a closed-door ethics hearing turned public spectacle. Schiff was there to testify regarding a recent internal dispute on intelligence oversight. Pirro, of all people, had been brought in as a special adjudicator after weeks of legal wrangling. She was blunt, no nonsense, and not one to be intimidated. Everyone knew there was bad blood between them. As Schiff was sworn in, the murmurs stopped. Pirro's first line of questioning was firm but fair. She asked about a memo Schiff had signed off on, a document that had quietly stirred bipartisan confusion. Then she asked a question that changed everything. Congressman, were you aware your office approved dissemination of a partially redacted brief that contradicted sworn testimony from 2 senior intelligence officials? The room held its breath. Schiff's jaw tightened. He gripped the table and snapped before anyone could stop him. "Don't lecture me about integrity, Judge," he said, his voice rising. "You're hardly in a position to question the ethics of oversight." Gasps spread across the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Pirro didn't flinch. Her silence, however, said more than words ever could. The second Schiff's words echoed off the marble walls, you could feel the energy shift. It wasn't just the insult, it was who he said it to. Judge Jeanine Pirro was many things, but a pushover wasn't one of them. For a full 5 seconds, she stared at Schiff without blinking, her pen frozen mid-note. Across the room, aides exchanged nervous glances. The court stenographer had stopped typing, unsure whether to look at the transcript or the ticking time bomb in front of her. Pirro slowly leaned forward, her tone ice-cold. "Congressman Schiff," she said, enunciating each syllable like a scalpel, "you may want to reconsider the direction you're choosing. This is a legal proceeding, not a cable news panel." Schiff's posture faltered. For the first time, he looked uncertain. He opened his mouth to respond, but Pirro cut him off with a raised hand. "No. You've made your point, now you'll listen to mine." He sat back, blinking hard. "I asked you a direct question about a government memo, not your opinion of me. Either you answer it, or I'll have no choice but to issue a contempt warning for disruption of proceedings." A low murmur ran through the chamber like distant thunder. Schiff swallowed. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced with the unmistakable glint of regret. He realized he'd just crossed a line. And Pirro was ready to draw a bold one in return. Adam Schiff sat frozen, staring at the judge's bench like it had just grown teeth. The swagger that had carried him into the room was gone, replaced by the look of a man who just realized he'd walked into a trap of his own making. Judge Pirro flipped through her folder with deliberate slowness, the crisp sound of paper slicing through the silence. Then she looked up. "I will repeat the question," she said, her voice steady but razor-sharp. "Were you aware that your office approved the release of a memo that conflicted with sworn testimony?" Schiff glanced at his legal counsel, a gray-haired man who shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak. The cameras were still rolling. Reporters sat like statues, pens trembling in their hands. The entire chamber felt like it was suspended in glass. Schiff finally leaned into the microphone. "I was made aware, but not before the document was circulated," he said, voice softer now, almost hesitant. "There was a miscommunication between my senior staff and," Pirro raised an eyebrow. "So your position is that national intelligence confusion was the result of a staff error?" The emphasis landed like a punch. Schiff hesitated. "I'm not placing blame," he said quickly. "But I didn't authorize it knowingly." Pirro nodded once, slow, skeptical. Then she closed the file in front of her with a loud snap. "In that case, Congressman, I suggest you prepare to clarify the chain of custody in writing, because this hearing isn't about emotion, it's about accountability." Schiff blinked again. The courtroom hadn't just turned on him, it was swallowing him whole. And this time, he wasn't holding the gavel. Judge Pirro didn't need to raise her voice. Her authority was in the way she paused, the way she made silence uncomfortable, like she was daring someone to interrupt. Schiff sat rigid, his fingers drumming against the table, but even that nervous rhythm faltered when she spoke again. Congressman, this body entrusted you with oversight of the most sensitive intelligence matters in the nation. Do you understand the gravity of that responsibility? Yes, Schiff replied, almost too quickly. Then explain to me, Pirro continued, tapping the memo on the desk with her pen, why your name is the only congressional signature authorizing the release of this redacted version, when multiple committee members claim they never saw it. Gasps. Not loud, but real. Schiff's mouth opened. Closed. He seemed to search for a way out, but no one was offering him a rope. Not even his own team. I was advised, it was procedural, he said finally, clearly grasping at control. The release was expedited for clarity. Pirro cut in. You call a document missing 3 key testimony segments clarity? The word hit hard. Schiff shrank slightly, his collar suddenly tight. Pirro sat back, folded her hands, and added one final dagger. You may want to reflect, Congressman, on whether your reaction to my question earlier was passion, or panic. A flush crept up Schiff's neck. He wasn't just losing the room, he was bleeding credibility in front of the nation. And everyone knew it. The courtroom no longer felt like a formal hearing, it felt like a political autopsy in real time. Every breath Schiff took now felt measured, like he was calculating the cost of each word. Judge Pirro folded her hands neatly over the case file and stared him down. Let's be honest with each other for a moment, she said, voice cool but loaded. When you lashed out earlier, was it because of my question, or because you already knew the answer didn't serve you? Schiff blinked slowly, then exhaled. The fire was gone. He looked, for the first time, like a man wrestling with himself. I spoke out of turn, he admitted, his voice quieter now, almost level. That was inappropriate. A subtle wave of surprise passed through the courtroom. Schiff didn't usually walk anything back. But here, now, he had no choice. Pirro gave no reaction, no nod, no smirk. Just silence. That was more damning than a rebuke. She turned a page, then looked up again. Admission is a start. Accountability is the next step, she said. I'm instructing your office to submit a full written record of internal communications regarding the memo's release within 72 hours. If any documents are found withheld or altered, I will move to initiate a formal sanction review. Someone in the back gasped audibly. Schiff looked stunned. This wasn't just a bad day. It was turning into a public reckoning, and every camera in the room was hungry for it. As the judge moved on to her next line of questioning, Schiff stared straight ahead, blinking rapidly. He had snapped. And now, under Pirro's surgical pressure, the consequences were slicing through fast. Just when it seemed things couldn't spiral further for Schiff, a court officer whispered something into Judge Pirro's ear. Her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. She nodded once, then turned back to the mic. For the record, she announced, her tone shifting to something more alert, we've just received confirmation that a supplemental document, previously unreleased, was leaked to the press this morning. A ripple of murmurs rolled through the courtroom like a wave hitting concrete. Reporters immediately started checking their phones, thumbs flying. Schiff stiffened. Pirro continued, calm but sharp. The document in question includes the unredacted portion of the memo we've been discussing, including the sections that were, shall we say, inconveniently omitted. Schiff's face drained of color. This wasn't speculation anymore, it was exposure. Congressman Schiff, Pirro said, her gaze steady, did you instruct anyone in your office to withhold these sections? He shook his head, almost instinctively. No. Absolutely not. If that document was leaked, I wasn't aware of it. Convenient timing, Pirro said flatly, eyes narrowing. Either someone's working against you from the inside, or you've lost control of your office. He opened his mouth to protest, but stopped short. She was right. Either way, it looked terrible. Judge Pirro flipped her file closed and sat back. This hearing just entered a new phase, she declared. And Congressman, if I were you, I'd be less concerned about public opinion, and more concerned about who's willing to burn you to save themselves. Every reporter in the room knew what was coming next. The fallout wasn't over. It was just beginning. By now, the hearing room was a pressure cooker. Reporters were whispering frantically, staffers were glued to their devices, and even Schiff's legal team looked rattled. But the real blow hadn't landed yet. Judge Pirro paused, then turned to the witness table behind Schiff. "Call your next witness," she instructed the clerk. "Mr. Langston, please take the stand." All eyes turned as David Langston, Schiff's longtime chief of staff, rose from his seat and approached the front. He adjusted his tie, but the way his hands trembled didn't go unnoticed. Schiff's eyes widened. His expression said everything, he didn't know Langston was on the list. "Raise your right hand," the clerk began. As Langston was sworn in, Schiff leaned toward his attorney, whispering urgently. The attorney just shook his head. This had already been approved by oversight, and Schiff hadn't challenged it in time. Pirro leaned forward. "Mr. Langston," she said, "you were copied on several internal emails concerning the release of the redacted memo. Can you confirm when you became aware of the discrepancies?" Langston hesitated. "Then, 3 days before the memo was published." "And did you inform Congressman Schiff of these discrepancies?" A long pause. You could hear a pin drop. "Yes," he said finally. Gasps. This time louder. Schiff's jaw clenched. "Did he instruct you to proceed anyway?" Langston glanced at his former boss. Then he looked at the judge. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, and I quote, "It'll die in the noise. Just put it out." The courtroom exploded. Cameras clicked, people stood, reporters whispered frantically into their phones. Schiff looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. And Judge Pirro? She simply smiled, like she'd known this moment was coming all along. Adam Schiff's hands were now clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. The moment Langston's words left his mouth, it was as if the floor beneath Schiff cracked wide open, and everyone saw the fall coming. Judge Pirro waited for the noise to settle, her gavel untouched. She didn't need it. Her silence was the gavel. "Mr. Langston," she said calmly, "you're under oath. You understand the penalty for perjury?" "I do," he replied, voice low but resolute. "And you stand by that quote?" "Yes," Langston said. "I didn't want to testify against my former boss, but I won't lie to protect anyone anymore. Not after what that memo did. The damage was nuclear." Schiff tried to respond, to object, to clarify, but his lawyer gently pulled his sleeve, silently urging him to stay silent. Anything he said now could trigger a perjury trap or worse. Pirro leaned forward. "Congressman," she said, her voice like frost, "if your own chief of staff testifies that you knowingly pushed out a deceptive memo during an open intelligence review, this court may move to recommend formal ethics charges to the House." She paused. Possibly even criminal referral. Schiff's breath caught in his throat. Then Judge Pirro delivered the final blow of the day. "This hearing will recess until tomorrow morning. Congressman Schiff, your testimony will resume after the committee completes a private review of Mr. Langston's communications log. You are advised to reconsider your earlier statements." She stood. Everyone stood. The hearing was adjourned. And Schiff? He remained seated, shoulders slumped, lips parted, eyes unfocused, like a man who had finally realized he wasn't walking away from this one. The courtroom had cleared, but the storm outside had just begun. News outlets were already live-streaming reactions. Headlines exploded across screens. Schiff's top aide turns on him under oath. Judge Pirro drops bombshell in ethics hearing, contempt charge looming. Inside a back room, Schiff sat at a polished wooden table with his legal team, silent and hollow. His lawyer flipped through a tablet, showing the leaked screenshots already circulating on social media, including the damning quote, "It'll die in the noise." Schiff finally spoke. "We need to go on offense." His attorney didn't look up. "Not today. Not after that." Across the building, Judge Pirro remained in her chambers reviewing Langston's email thread, already flagged by internal monitors. The timestamps lined up. The phrase was there. Word for word. The committee's legal counsel knocked once and entered. "We've confirmed it," they said. Langston wasn't lying. Pirro closed the file slowly. "Then Congressman Schiff has two options tomorrow: come clean, or watch his career bleed out in real time." Back at Schiff's temporary suite, aides were already scrambling. Calls went out to allies in the House. A media consultant was drafting a statement to frame it as a misinterpreted internal exchange. But deep down, they all knew the truth: this wasn't a messaging problem anymore. It was a credibility crisis, and it was spreading like fire in dry grass. The next morning, the hearing chamber buzzed with a different kind of energy. Everyone knew what was coming, and more importantly, what wasn't. Adam Schiff walked in with his team trailing behind him like shadows. He looked composed, but thinner, paler. The weight of national scrutiny pressed heavy on his shoulders. He adjusted his tie and took his seat without looking at anyone. Judge Pirro entered moments later. The room snapped to attention. "This session will resume with the testimony of Congressman Schiff," she announced. "Congressman, before we proceed, do you have a statement to offer the court?" Schiff took a breath. Then another. Slowly, he leaned into the microphone. "I want to begin by acknowledging this court, and Judge Pirro, for the seriousness of these proceedings," he said, measured. "I allowed frustration to override my judgment. My earlier outburst was unprofessional and I regret it." A respectful silence followed. "But more importantly," he continued, "I acknowledge that the release of the redacted memo was mishandled. While I did not directly alter the contents, I take full responsibility for the decisions made under my leadership. That includes what my staff released, and how it was received." Gasps rippled softly. Pirro didn't react. She waited. "I understand that this has damaged trust," he added. "And while I do not believe my actions were criminal, I fully accept the committee's review, and whatever recommendations it deems appropriate." The room held still. This wasn't a complete confession. But it was far more than anyone had expected. Pirro nodded slowly. "Then this hearing will conclude pending committee deliberation. Findings will be submitted to the House Oversight Board within 10 days. Until then, this court stands in recess." She stood. Schiff didn't. As the gavel finally fell, reporters rushed for exits, phones already in hand. Schiff's team remained seated, absorbing the moment. The damage was done. He had snapped, been exposed, and forced to yield, all on the record, all under the relentless pressure of someone he underestimated. Judge Pirro. And while Schiff might still hold his seat, his grip on public trust would never be the same.